Good morning, Professor Tootle.
Good morning.
Is President Trump an autocrat?
No.
Really? Okay.
Well, he's
Well, go ahead then. Go
well,
ahead.
he would like to be, but he is not.
Boy, that's an important distinction, probably. Or are we in an autocracy now? Or are we in an
No.
authoritarian regime?
Yes.
Oh,
Well,
well,
hold on.
that interests
No,
me as well.
we don't live in autocracy, but we have. I mean, we've had some presidents with these tendencies in the past, and our institutions have held in the past. So I would say we don't live in an autocracy, but we have someone in office who would prefer to be an autocrat.
Okay. Okay, I'll accept all that. So, the reason I didn't even want to really say hello today, Professor, is I'm trying to demonstrate, should we just be living normally? Is, like everything's fine in America. I go to work, you raise your family, you do your hobbies, you read a novel, you read a historical biography. Or is this time different? And so let me give you one more premise to hang on to. I Googled those two questions at 3 this morning. I said, is or who are the presidents that are autocrats? And then I did autocracy as well. And of course, Google and AI popped up with 7 presidents that have been autocrats. And I think
Oh,
you may
interesting.
know. Yeah, I think you know them all
Well,
from.
can I hear them one by one, and I'll say
Oh,
if
do I want me to pull up my doc? I did take notes. I was going to ask you if you could name them, and then I was going to tell you whether you were right or not.
because you know,
How about starting with the second president?
well, I know why they would say that, but I don't
Well, it's a pretty
agree.
big reason, Professor. What do you mean, why? I mean, come on.
Well, because you know who we need to get on this show? Actually, this just reminded me is Lindsay Chervinsky.
Never heard of that name.
Oh, she's amazing. She's the current White House historian, meaning
Oh,
I think sure it's the White House History Association, the History Association. But she's a
friend of yours?
really incredible, and she's kind of the John Adams expert, and her insights into John Adams have really changed how I view him. And so I would like her to come on the show, maybe
But a friend of yours
and
will be able to get her?
probably. I would say we're friendly. I wouldn't call her a friend. We've never met
Okay.
in person, but yeah.
Well, but Professor, that's good.
Yeah,
We'll
go
get to
ahead.
that.
So I would say not John Adams. I wouldn't put John Adams on
Oh,
that.
come on. He made the Alien Sedition Act where you can't criticize the government, and they locked people up. And Jefferson, the third president, pardoned them all. I mean, when I read this morning, I went, gosh, I don't even need to be friends with a PhD historian. I can just Google AI and know everything I need. All the lessons are the same from the second and the third president to what we're talking about today, aren't they?
I don't think
Lock them
so.
up.
I think
Okay, now
I
talk to me
think that
why.
you have to like the idea that you would somehow compare John Adams to Donald Trump is just such an insult to John Adams. Like this is somebody whose life burned with a passion for liberty and establishing American ideals and institutions from early on, and who sacrificed mightily in every moment of his life. Practically, he woke up and thought about what was best for the United States and not best for himself. It- I, Donald Trump has, uh, if you were to measure the goo in John Adams's toenail, that that would be how much of Donald Trump is in John Adams. Um, you cannot.
Professor, you are not going to get a presidential appointment.
Oh, that went out the window a long time ago.
You're
I mean, the
not
first
going to
time I
get
refused
appointed.
to meet him, I pretty much.
Okay.
I mean, there was a moment where I was asked, like, "Well, do you want to meet?" He wasn't president yet, and I said, "No, I don't want to meet him." And I said to the
Yeah.
person who invited me, like, "No, I told you how I feel about him." Um, and so that went out the window back in probably uh, 2015, 2016. Oh, now you're frozen. Should I
Yeah,
filibuster?
yeah, I can hear you, Professor. Keep going.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. No, go ahead. After John Adams, who else would they have called an autocrat? I
Yeah, I'm
mean,
pulling it up, and for some reason it
Andrew
made my computer
Jackson
slow.
probably, I think. I mean,
Yep,
they're the ones who I would say um so I'd say Andrew Jackson, Woodrow Wilson,
yep,
FDR at times.
yeah. Oh, FDR in a big time. What do you mean at times? In a big way.
Well, but there's an important distinction I'd make with FDR because of when he took office. We were already at such a crisis that he could have become a dictator. And very famously, Walter Lippmann, the great liberal and progressive intellectual, wrote him a letter saying, Franklin, you might have to assume dictatorial powers. And Franklin Roosevelt could have become a dictator, and he chose not to. And I think that when our institutions were perhaps at their weakest and most vulnerable, it is important that he chose to do what he did through American institutions. And if you want to be convinced by that, my advisor wrote a book called For the Survival of Democracy. And it's basically the thesis of my advisor's last book, Alonzo Hamby. Um, but there were other presidents. I mean, Woodrow Wilson said things like, men thought I had all the power. Would to God that I had that power. He wanted to be a dictator. Then um, Lyndon Johnson also said that he wouldn't have minded being dictator of the world if he could end child poverty. And that's probably true. Uh, and so, I mean, we've had presidents who have had contempt for or who did not respect the limitations on their office, but we've never really had an autocracy in America. I mean, the closest you would say would be under Woodrow Wilson. Well, under Woodrow Wilson, at when he was assuming um, really autocratic powers during World War I, I'd say is probably the closest we've ever come. Now, we've got some technical difficulties here. Um, I will keep talking. Um, I'll,
Professor, where are you?
sorry, I tried to keep talking when you went away, but
Yeah. And
I,
so where'd you end to quit talking? Were you still on FDR, or did you keep talking and
no, no,
talking and
I
talking?
went through them all and listed the ones who were most likely to be in the category of being autocrats. And then I said the closest we've ever come, and if we ever did have something approaching a true autocracy in America, was Woodrow Wilson during World War One.
Okay. Well, but none of them compare to President Trump.
Which Wilson, World War One was worse, I would say.
Okay, so Trump is the second worst president as
No,
far
he's the
as
worst president for other reasons, but I just mean in
right.
terms of actually both desiring to have that power and
Yeah.
and then actually doing things in office that with that authority, I'd say he's probably the second worst after Wilson.
Okay, so Professor, I'd like you to take us through for a few minutes on the types of things that President Trump has done. And then you can weave in other presidents throughout history if it's helpful to understand how serious it
How serious it is, I assume, is the end of that sentence. Um, the I th I think that's the end of your sentence. Sorry, folks, we're having some more technical difficulties with our host. Well, let's see. Um, do we want to maybe start this episode over because we've already had two long breaks here. Um, hey, John, when you come back on, do we want to restart this episode? Maybe. Um, I apologize to everybody who's signed on. Um, I'm not sure what's happening with the other end of this. Can you guys all hear me okay? Am I coming through all right? Give me a thumbs up or something if
Yes, we can hear
okay.
you fine.
Okay. Um,
Where are you at now, Professor?
well, I was wondering if you wanted to just restart the episode. Is
Well,
where
it's the third time it's happened in 10 minutes, so I'm worried that it may get worse. So I don't want to restart the episode. Let's keep going.
okay.
Unfortunately, sorry.
Is there some
Um,
way maybe we can go back and use some editing software and chop
yeah,
the
maybe,
long
maybe.
silences
Yeah,
out?
I
Because I
know.
don't want to put this on the interweb with long, awkward pauses.
150 shows, and this is the worst technological problem. Sorry, Professor.
Yeah.
Connected, and if you can chat, and maybe we'll have to, you know, hold into it.
Well,
Maybe we'll
next
have to.
time I'll just keep talking. I won't. I'll
Yeah,
just
there we go.
invent. I'll filibuster if it happens again.
There we go. Thanks. So, Professor, my question is in President Trump,
Mhm.
in autocratic actions, whether it's executive orders or whether it's orders to cabinet members or, all the different ways presidents have power, I guess, executing warlike actions. Um, I'm a little concerned that the average citizen doesn't really think through policy differences versus what may be constitutional, which may be a violation of congressional statute, which may just be a regulatory policy they don't like, or maybe even a personality thing that they don't like. It seems like there's
Yeah.
a hierarchy of things that we should distinguish.
Well,
What's
this
your
is why I
reaction?
hesitated to just start going through a list. Um,
Yeah.
I think it'd be more helpful if you were to give me a specific example, and I can say, here's where the line is. In other words,
Let's take care of the a major one in Article Two powers. Military action, declaring war in Venezuela or Iran or blowing up boats in the Caribbean.
okay.
Constitutional, autocratic. What's your instinct on all that?
Well, this is one where, it might disappoint people who don't like President Trump, but this is one where the president does have pretty wide authority and it's not unconstitutional. And, um, this is an area where we can criticize it from a policy standpoint, but we can't really say that it's unconstitutional. We would just say if you don't like what he's doing, you should have voted for someone else. But it's not necessarily illegal or unconstitutional when um, because presidents do have pretty broad authority, especially to make decisions, and almost all of our check on presidential authority in foreign policy and in war making comes after the thing has already happened. So if Congress or the American people don't like, for instance, his policy with regards to Venezuela or in his first term, even, Syria, for instance, um, that the proper avenue for that would be for Congress to then limit the funding or pass a law prohibiting that specific act. Um, but for the most part, even when it's a bad idea, it is constitutional and it's not illegal for the president to do so. And
Yeah,
it's
I concur. So, but
backlash.
Professor, is there a way to distinguish between politically and legally, constitutionally, and character traits or personality? It could still be an autocratic behavior. I mean, like one president might say, Congress, please give me the power to declare war against Iran. And then they debate it. And then he has that power, where another president would say, I don't care what Congress thinks at all. I don't care. I'm just doing what I'm going to do. Is there, I mean, it seems like citizens conflate these two issues and they go, look at him, he's a dictator. He's doing what he wants to do. He's an autocrat. He's a totalitarian. But really, to your point, no, he's not a totalitarian. The Constitution gives him tremendous power. That's not totalitarian. That is our system. Do you
Yeah.
see what I'm saying on the?
Yeah, and I've defended Abraham Lincoln on this point for many years because they'd say, "Oh, Abraham Lincoln, look at the power that he used during wartime." And I would always point out the Constitution says, you can do this stuff during wartime. You can do this stuff during a rebellion. The only way that it was unconstitutional is if there was no rebellion taking place. But there was a rebellion taking place, so he's not stretching the Constitution. He's following it, and there are elements and I know if you signed on to hear me bag on President Trump, I guess I would say it's a bad idea. It's a bad precedent. Um, the idea of just sort of blowing up boats in the Caribbean. But if you truly believed that what he did was somehow illegal or immoral or motivated by something other than um, doing what's best for American foreign policy. Let's say you think, oh, he's doing this to pump and dump a stock, or you know, inflate the value of his Bitcoin holdings or something. Then the proper avenue would be to have Congress do an investigation and then hold, and then if they find that something like that was motivating his foreign policy, then it would be impeachment and removal from office. Um, but there's nothing you can do once a president is elected to stop that stuff before he does it. Uh, the,
In foreign policy and acts of war
yeah,
and
yeah, they have
okay,
broad authority to act in foreign policy and in acts of
let's move to a hybrid.
okay,
Declaring an emergency and therefore taking an act of Congress, an emergency, and putting tariffs on it, saying, hey, this is a serious thing internationally. I'm president. It's an emergency. We're putting on the following tariffs. Now, the Supreme Court just ruled on that. So
yeah.
we have he's an autocrat in that instance.
Well, I guess in the sense of like, he doesn't really even know how to declare an emergency. So what I mean by this sort of contempt he has for procedure is that it's like we have, if you want to know what he's like as president, imagine Michael Scott from The Office walking outside of his office and saying, I declare bankruptcy. You know, walking outside of your office and saying, I declare bankruptcy, you haven't actually declared bankruptcy. Even the idea of declaring an emergency, there's a procedure for that. And there are notifications and laws about what must be done. And he tends to not do those things, and then simply says, I mean, and he surrounds himself with people who don't stop him from doing this. And that's why so much of it gets thrown out in court at the lowest possible level. It's because they can't even file paperwork in courts. You might as well be writing it in crayon or something. So um, a true autocrat, I guess, would probably be more effective. Uh, I mean, in a way, it's something that the American people kind of like about President Trump, I think, is that, when Obama or Biden or even a Clinton, what they would tend to do is stretch the definition of the law beyond all recognition, try to win on a technicality, try to find some small, obscure law and then drive a truck through it. This was Biden's student loan plan.
Yeah, student loans. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect example of this. You're taking this wartime act designed for, um, forgiveness of the student loans of people who were at war during the Gulf War. And now you're saying, hey, there's currently a law. It's never been repealed, and we're just going to use this to forgive all student loans, and try to beat the Constitution on a technicality, but also having technically competent lawyers so that, and I say that the American people sort of prefer Trump because, um, uh, you know, no one likes the smart alecky, highly paid lawyer who wins because of a technicality, you know? Um, and that's what a lot of my Trump supporting friends say is it's a strange defense of him, but they'll often say, like, at least he's honest in his dishonesty. That at least he just comes out and says, "Here's what I want to do," and I I don't know anything, and just do it. You know,
Well,
uh,
and we all have friends, and occasionally probably even ourselves, that are, makes decisions rashly or decide to throw blows. Now, you and I don't do that, but as younger people, they throw blows and look, he's doing something. Look at that. He's taking it to him. Look at that. He's
so,
fighting for us. And they like that. They don't care if he's winning or not. They just like the fight, right?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And in a way, he is pointing out the hypocrisy of the previous two administrations. Maybe, if you throw the some Clinton in there too. But it's one of the things that this is something that kind of Victor Davis Hanson pointed out early on is that he's making everybody look like hypocrites because when you criticize this, what Trump is doing, you are also implicitly pointing out the things that Obama and Biden were doing. Um, and go ahead.
Professor, for newcomers to joining us today, as well as people that watch this in the future, you didn't mention Obama or the Bushes, Obama, Clinton, Biden is one of the top authoritarians or the autocrats in the out of the 44 presidents the nation's had. The last 4 or 5 have not been in that same bucket of autocrats. Have they? They may have done unconstitutional actions, but they
Well,
weren't.
I mean, but here's the thing. They were all Wilson light. You know, the the example set by Woodrow Wilson, this is one of the reasons why we hate Woodrow Wilson so much, is that Woodrow Wilson wanted to undo the Constitution, wanted to use the Constitution in order to destroy the Constitution. And he wanted to create this legal theory that said essentially every generation of people gets to stretch the Constitution to fit what they want it to say, and you can just sort of reinterpret it however you want. And it ends up being in its crudest form a way of saying might makes right. We won the election. We're now going to stretch the Constitution however we want. But within that Wilsonian tradition, uh, number one, they haven't had war powers. They haven't been presidents who were in power during a time of World War. Uh, and although I guess you could say that the emergency of COVID gave Biden
Trump
a
slash
period
Biden.
of extraordinary power. So, maybe I could be convinced that we might throw Biden during COVID into some of this, but yeah, but they're continuations of this Wilsonian tradition, which means that they are still making an argument connected with the Constitution in order to undo it. Uh, but they are still making an argument connected to the Constitution in some way. I
Well,
mean,
so, but Professor, I'm sorry to keep pushing back on
yeah,
you,
yeah.
but okay, so Obama wanted to help immigrant children that were born here as kids, and so he created this thing out of whole cloth that he didn't have the authority to do. DACA I happen to support the result. I like that. I think it's a good result, but Congress needed to do that. The president doesn't have the authority to do that, and
Well,
so
that's what I said. It's most dangerous. That's the point. I mean, you think about my initial warning about President Trump was about the things that he would do that were popular. That it's when the president is doing something that we like that we will overlook the fact that he's doing it in an illegal way. And it makes representative governments particularly vulnerable to populist leaders. And that's how I see Trump is I see him as really more in line with a President Obama, and during his first term, I said it a lot that he was a sort of dumb Obama, um, but and Biden was more of FDR, LBJ type of a liberal. Um, again, in that sort of Wilsonian progressive tradition, but that's why I find those leaders particularly dangerous, especially to have them back to back, is because representative institutions are always vulnerable to a populist leader doing popular things. In a way, we've been almost lucky, and I know this sounds strange, in that President Trump is doing some popular things, but he's also doing things that are actually unpopular and that are bad ideas. And so we are actually noticing the bad effects of his policies, and people are objecting to them. I mean, his approval ratings are incredibly low because on almost every major issue, he's underwater, on in terms of public support. But in a way, we're lucky because if he was just doing stuff that was popular with the American people, he would be even more dangerous.
That's a really interesting point. So I don't know whether to keep going down through specifics, Professor. We can go through tariffs and birthright citizenship and immigration policy and deporting illegal immigrants to third countries, or we can go through.
Well,
Uh,
I guess, but those are good examples. I mean, in particular, immigration and border. When when he is securing the border and following the law, even in a strict sense,
mhm.
he has public support. But it's when it appears to be selective prosecution, when he is doing it in an inefficient way or in a way that seems to be not prioritizing dangerous criminals, that's when he loses public support.
Yeah, so it's just be an incompetent. Well, I can't tell if it's incompetent or if it's intentional.
Well,
I
it's often, I mean, he doesn't hire based on competence. He hires based on loyalty. And so when you have within his administration some very patriotic people who are trying to do a good job, but there are also people who are, I think, are probably evil and in many cases racists and have bizarre, political agendas, and they project loyalty up to him, and then they enact policy with sometimes nefarious designs and but often they're also
let me
competent.
interrupt again, Professor. Isn't
Yeah.
it true though that his execution of immigration through Stephen Miller and others has been intentional? He wants to scare people from coming into the country. He wants to say, we're going to terrorize you. We're going to imprison you. We're going to send you to third countries, world countries. We're going to be heinous. We're going to rip you out of your car. We're going to rip you out of your home. You're not welcome here. Do not come here. To me, that looks like it was an intentional policy to make America so inhospitable to newcomers that people would stop coming to the gate to try to get in. Am I wrong, or you just think that was incompetent or mean spirited just in and of itself?
Well, that is, insofar as it's coming from him directly, you can't just say this is the incompetence of AIDS. But, and even in, but again, insofar as he's saying he wants to be scary and saying don't break the law, I don't know that that's what Americans have a problem with.
Well,
Uh,
but it's not just scary to don't break the law. It's going, we're going to rough you up if you break the law. I mean, it's not just,
yeah,
hey, I mean, we're going to hurt you.
yes, and absolutely, and I would say 70% of Americans recoil in horror at that kind of.
Okay, well, I concur with that. Hope said she's going to be leaving soon. So her question to us is my opening question. Do we just keep moving on, living our lives? Do we do anything about the current era other than name calling or calling, hey, representative, I'm mad at Trump. Hey, senator, here's an email about tariffs. Really, should we be doing something different? Let's answer that for Hope, and then we'll.
Yeah, I think that what's far more important now is that because of the ease of letter writing and phone calls, I think the most important thing is to actually show up to your political party. Like find out where your local county party meets and just start going to the meetings. If you want to do something, and as far as what you do once you're there, you'll know what to do. They'll start asking you to do stuff, and you'll say yes or no to it based on what you can
You
afford.
don't mean meeting with your county commissioner and state legislator
No,
and
no,
Congress.
no,
You mean
no.
doing party work.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because then, by the way, they'll put you in touch with those people. I mean,
Right.
anyone who becomes involved in either the Democratic or the Republican Party, you will immediately come into contact with any elected officials who are of that party. Now, if you don't want to do that, I would say um, start a new party. Start some sort of other organization. Or find your local unaffiliated, and this might be more productive, which is find your local person who is not affiliated with the Republican or Democratic Party, if you have one in your area, and start trying to connect those unaffiliated politicians with one another and say, hey, whatever is causing you to reject the Republican or Democratic Party, I would like to be a part of that as well. And
And Professor, I've got a different answer that I think you'll concur with. And since I'm not a Republican anymore, it's been a decade since I've been unaffiliated. I look at the county commissioner, or state legislator, or congressperson that I can vote for, see if I like them or not. If I like him or her, I call them up and say, "Hey, I want to walk door to door with you," or
yeah,
when's the next thing? I'll drive you to your next meeting and be your aide or whatever.
yeah.
If I don't
But
like them, then I interview their candidates against them and say, "Hey, I'd like to walk door to door with you," and they're just thrilled for you.
yeah, and I would say that's sort of more along the lines of what I have done because even though I'm not um, a member of the party central committee anymore, I am still friends with, and I still believe that we have a lot of really good elected officials in my area. And and I'll say you could, if donating just a little bit of money, um, they might have some sort of rubber chicken dinner that costs you $100, but donate $100 and go to that rubber chicken dinner. It would be another. Um, Hope has another question. Yeah, yeah. She just says that she wishes that she had taken my advice back in 2016. Yeah.
So
Um,
for folks that don't know what you're talking about, and if she signs off, that'll be fine. But Professor, go to that now. You wrote a pretty harsh. I mean, in fact, I don't like an element of it. It's a lot of my friends are doing what you did back 10 years ago. Said if you don't do this,
yeah.
whatever Trump does in the future is your fault. And I just generally don't like putting out
Yeah.
blanket statements on all of this. So there's my critique of your recommendation to us. But you were really harsh that Trump was going to be the disaster for America, and you're
Yeah.
saying, "Hey, I told you so." So tell us about what your letter said and what.
Yeah, I said, let me be as direct as possible about what you need to do right now, which is you need to switch your party designation so that you can vote for Marco Rubio uh, in this upcoming primary. And if you don't do this, what happens next will be your fault. And I would say the only reason I've never written anything like that I had until that moment, and I haven't written anything like that since that moment.
However, Professor, you do
Yeah.
stand by it because I looked up at the original one and you've shared it like 5 or 6 times
Yeah.
over the last 10 years. You're proud of writing that letter 10 years ago.
Well, what I hoped was that I had, at least with some people, earned enough credibility that they would know that I wouldn't say something like that unless I was serious. Because like I said, I never have. Uh, and I want people to know that if I ever say something like that again, I mean it.
Yeah.
Like, because there has been precisely one time in my life when I told other people what to do. And I said, if you don't listen to me right now, bad things are going to happen. And then no one listened, and a bunch of bad stuff happened. So I will never do this again unless I am 100% positive. So I want the word. I I wanted people, hopefully, to. I wanted to know that I could sleep at night because because I did everything I could possibly do to prevent Donald Trump's election. Um, and I everything I could think of. And I warned about it in as clearly as I possibly could. And I don't have a reputation, I don't think, for being some sort of like hothead or some kind of a radical. But, every bit of my study of American history says we have a particular vulnerability to a particular kind of populist um, um, potential leader. And it is the thing we are most, in terms of the sort of long-term success of representative government in the world, this is, to my mind, the biggest threat. And so I wanted to be as clear as I could be
So,
about.
Professor, I want you to keep sussing that out for us because a year before that, or 6 months before you wrote that missive, I was doing similar things, but I don't think we knew each other at least well. Maybe
Mm,
we'd met at the American Enterprise Institute, but we weren't friends like we are today. We've
yeah.
only been doing this podcast for 5 years, and we became friends maybe a year before the podcast. So 10 years ago or 11 years ago, I wrote a missive that says if he becomes our nominee, I'm going to resign the party. And so for 10 months, I worked hard within the party. I was still holding caucuses. I was still a precinct leader. I was trying to get anyone. I think I was a Kasich guy, if my memory is right. But I was also happy to go to Rubio. I think I may have seen your missive. But I knew in my heart that Trump didn't give a whit about the Constitution. Never has, never will. It's just not in his motive. He doesn't care.
I mean,
He,
and before the last election, he said it. He put it in writing. I mean, he sent out a statement saying that if he's elected, he will set aside the Constitution. I
and
I
but
don't know
there's
how much,
this.
and it's not like we're inventing this about it. Those were his words.
You and I look at that and go, okay, you're not eligible to serve. Not only
Yeah,
as president, but in any elected official in anywhere in the country, you're not eligible.
right. You swear one oath, which is to support, preserve and protect and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. And you're saying before you take that oath, I'm not going to follow this oath.
Okay, so Professor, you and I are, I guess, we can pat each other on the backs for
But
looking
I
out
want to
for
get the
America.
timeline straight on one thing, John, though, because this is important to also remember that I warned about that in February of 2016.
Yep.
And I not only did I not resign from the party, I still maintained my leadership within the Republican Party because I was told by people who are now very high up in the Trump world. They and what they said is, look, don't resign. He's going to lose the election anyway, and just we'll put the party back together again after this train wreck of a year, and we'll start in 2017. And so I didn't actually resign from um, party leadership until after he won the election.
So, Professor, I resigned. I did resign the party after the primary in Colorado, and I knew it was only going to be for 3 months, and then I was going to re-register as a Republican and
Yeah,
fight the
yeah,
good fight.
right.
And then, well, it had to be 4 years and 3 months because he got elected. And then all of a sudden, and then more happened, and Biden, blah blah blah. Uh, what? Well, it's been 10 years now, Professor, and the American citizens didn't care about his comments and don't care all about this litany of constitutional violations. And you can talk policy, or you can talk incompetence, or meanness, or character traits. There's all sorts of things we can talk about, but but they don't care, at least yet. Maybe they'll care in the midterms in 8 months from now. But people don't care about our Constitution, do they?
Well, I mean, I guess only a third of them know that we have three branches of government. So you have to
Well,
always
flesh
keep
that
that
out
in.
a little bit more for us.
Oh, just in public polls for the last 10, 15, maybe even 20 years, the civic knowledge has been on the decline pretty steadily. And always keep in mind that only about a third of adult Americans can name the three branches of government. So the idea that they would be engaging in politics on some sort of high-minded, civic level based on their deep understanding of the Constitution is just not true.
So they didn't listen to President Trump's tweet on or X saying I'm going to violate the Constitution or I don't care about it. They didn't. They don't hear about it. They don't see about it. They don't care. But they might vote when it comes along. They'll fill in a bubble and they fill in the guy that's fighting. Right.
Well, and more likely what you would typically see is the Democrats are the same or worse. At least Trump is being honest. And if I'm gonna choose between two people who act unconstitutionally, I'm gonna choose the guy who is unconstitutional in the way I like.
So the folks that call and you bordered on it. I said to you my criticism. The election's your fault. If this happens, it's your fault. Um, I have a ton of friends now, and I'm almost embroiled in a daily argument with them that want to call him a fascist or a dictator or a Nazi. And I keep telling them not to do that. And I saw that Adam Kinzinger came out this week and wrote a Substack. Trump is now a fascist. We should all just admit to it. And I read it and it hit me cold. It didn't persuade me. I thought it might give him some credence because of his involvement. It actually kind of turned me off a little bit. It made me more adamant not to call him a fascist or a Nazi. Do you have an instinct? I mean, if he's a serious threat, as you predicted 10 years ago, then what should we be doing? Go back to that. I know you said let's get involved in the local stuff, but don't we protest? Don't we actually do civil disobedience at some point? Isn't there
Yeah,
some
I
red
would say
line?
if there's a time when you think that protest or civil disobedience is appropriate, then yes, absolutely, you should do
But you
that.
don't think it's happened yet? All the private ownership of companies. I think he's done 16 companies now.
Yeah, I just
I
don't
mean,
know
there's
I mean, what act of civil disobedience would you engage
be
in?
effective.
I mean, if you get 1,000 people and go to, I'm trying to think of the companies that we now own a piece of. What do you do? Go and have a sit-in in their offices? I mean,
Yeah, hang out the front
maybe.
door.
I guess. If somebody was suggesting that and it was in your area, maybe, yeah, you might do that. But it's just hard to see the areas where
Well,
that could be productive.
okay, well, militarization through ICE, no badges, no face coverings, and they're in your community, ripping your customers out of a car in front of your pizza shop. I mean, at some point you gotta.
Well, I mean, I guess the frustrating thing for me in that regard is that where's the Democratic proposal to actually reform this stuff? I mean, I've seen the people who say like abolish ICE and stuff like that, but we have to have some form of federal policing and enforcing federal laws. So that's kind of a non-starter. I want to see the Democratic plan that they can rally behind and that they can get like a third of Republicans to vote for, that if you have a problem with these policies, that what are you for? There could be a
So
constructive answer to that.
So, Professor, there's been a couple elements on that has actually countered the autocracy. The Epstein stuff. Trump wasn't going to release this. He did not want to release it, and it took four Republican congressmen and women and forcing it through over the objections of the Speaker of the House, and then because the politics unanimous in the Senate, then President Trump signed it. So he's not an autocrat. If he sees the pressure from Congress, to your point, well, then he does something different. Is that your point? I mean, Congress should act. If they don't like the Epstein non-release, change the law, which they did, right?
Yeah, I mean that would be one example, sure.
Tariffs. Congressman Bacon said we should change the law on tariffs. So they have a proposal. I don't know if it's going anywhere, but
Yeah, well, let's see, but let's do the hard work of, not just proposing symbolic legislation, but actually engaging in the kind of compromise legislation that, I always say, let's get this bad law passed and then we'll wait and pass the next bad law. That's the way the system is supposed to work.
okay. Um, I don't know whether we should go to questions now. We've been going for a
Well,
while.
there's one thing in the comments I suppose I could address. You said
Go ahead and take it.
lump Americans into a single category. I said that, only a third of Americans can name the three branches of government. So I wasn't referring to all Americans. I would refer to
And
two-thirds.
that's probably across the political spectrum on
Yeah,
that.
there's no sort of partisan split on this, really.
Yeah. Okay. Are there any other questions like that, Terry? Do you want to jump in with one of the citizen things you've been doing?
No, thank you.
Yeah.
Was that a no or a yes?
Yeah, she said no.
Okay. Thank you for that. Bart, do you want to jump in now? We kind of need some legal analysis to figure this out. Are you ready?
Legal analysis.
Legal
Yeah.
analysis of what?
Well, constitutional versus statute, congressional statute. Should we be concerned in an authoritarian way, or is this the normal dynamic? Anything legally that you'd think we should be thinking about?
To be honest, I think I think what's going on in terms of constitutionality of this and constitutionality of that and statutory interpretation, I think that's all pretty normal, to be very honest. That's the way we carry on. Well, in the legal community, that's how we carry on debates. Among the public, I think people look at the policy behind the words. So I think that's all very normal in that sense.
Okay, let me ask you a hardball extreme, and then Professor Tugel, if you'll jump in on this as a follow-up from a historical approach. So Bart, to your point about you sue, a state sues or a special interest group representing a citizen sues if they don't like President Trump's policy. Then it takes time to go through the courts and then appeals. Then maybe they change the policy. Maybe they try to sell. I mean, all sorts of stuff takes time. Here's the hardball one, January 6, 2021. And it took 4 years, and then the president got reelected and you dropped all the suits. So Garland and just that whole thing. Why the heck did that take? You're saying that's normal. It takes 4 years. So, he's not an autocrat. He did some weird stuff on January 6, 2021, but he was never prosecuted for it. Well, he was prosecuted, but then they dropped the case. So we move on. Is that right? Or do we move on?
Well, that's what we're doing. I don't know. I don't think it's right, to be honest. I don't think it's right. I think it did take the Biden Justice Department way too long to prosecute people for January 6th. I think it's undeniable. I think they waited way too long to go after the ringleaders of what was happening. They prosecuted some participants, but that was easy stuff. If you're hitting somebody over the head with a metal flagpole or something, okay, that's really bad. They can, they know what's going on, but they should have probably prosecuted Rudy Giuliani. There's a whole bunch of people that should have been prosecuted for January 6th that were never touched.
So as far as an autocrat goes, though, isn't that the best example of an autocratic behavior? I don't like the results of the election, and I'm going to figure out any conceivable legal and political way to stop it. And looks like there's lots of proof, and it still didn't work. In America, we just kind of let it happen.
Well, that's what's happened here right now. I don't know if it's, if it happens all the time, but it's what's happening with this stuff.
Okay.
Yes.
So
and I think, you're citing a perfect example. I think this is, Donald Trump is not like a monolithic figure. I think this is a side to him that is very autocratic. He has turned the U.S. Justice Department essentially into a bunch of lackeys. They do whatever he says. And I say that as a fellow alumnus of the same law school that Pam Bondi graduated from, okay? I'm not proud of that. It's just one of those things. I shake my head going, you've got to be kidding.
Yes.
Yeah, and I don't know where you're going.
And the worst thing is that it makes it incredibly difficult to ever prosecute him because, and this might be a good question for Bart, 'cause I've thought about this myself. Can he pardon himself? Because by pardoning everyone else, it means that essentially, nobody else has to fear prosecution. And I think the most autocratic thing that he has done is his use of pardons and selective prosecution. That
Yeah.
is I mean, to me, the clearest example of something he has already done. It is it
Yeah.
is so, and that
Yeah.
is historically different, but I would say the Joe Biden sort of led the way with
his pardons,
his
the family
pardons.
members,
It just
Yeah, well, the reality is Trump doesn't have to pardon himself because he's been held immune to prosecution
well, he's
by the
immune
U.S.
for
Supreme
official
Court.
acts.
So,
I think there is still a possibility that he could be held liable for criminal acts that are unrelated to his official acts as president. So,
well, let's
you
go
know,
there again. Let's go there.
okay.
President Trump in this election cycle, both like a year ago and last week, and supposedly coming up in the near future, has said we're going to federalize we're going to federalize elections, and we're going to show IDs, and we're going to eliminate mail voting, whether Congress acts or not. Well, where is that in the
No, he
Constitution
can't
that
do
the
that.
president
No,
has any
he won't
authority
do
to
it. He
do any
can't
of
do
that?
it. That's absurd. That is completely absurd. He wouldn't even have the ability to do it.
Right, fine. Now we get along into August, and it won't happen at the primary, but we get along into October and early voting's going on, and the ballots have already gone out, right? 7 states, Colorado plus 7 other states, and he goes and seizes ballots.
He won't do it.
For the
Can't do it.
FBI?
I mean, this is the kind of stuff that if he did do this stuff, we would have a revolution.
Well,
I
but he's
mean,
already done it. He went to Georgia. He's saying he's going to do this. He's saying he doesn't need. I mean, why don't we listen to him?
if he sends, I don't even know who he would send or who would listen to him.
The FBI.
If the FBI actually did this,
Well, they've already done it. They got all the ballots in Georgia, and you don't think they're going to come out with a report that there was some kind of fraud in Georgia?
I don't know how they could. I guess they could just make stuff up, but and that's always a possibility. But you're talking about preemptively doing this
During an election.
during an election. I just cannot. I mean, I guess this is where I would rely on the culture of the institutions of America and on an individual Americans who would simply say, like, no. I mean, this is already what makes it difficult is that so many people resign or have been fired that they're unable to execute many aspects. I mean, I think back to I can't tell you how I know this because I have personal friends who
Yeah,
were
don't say it.
involved in some of this, but when he first started messing with tariffs and pulled out of TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And this is one of those unreported and will probably never be reported type scandals, which is I was talking to some of my friends who are, work for other countries. They are not American citizens, but they are high-ranking officials for other nations in the Pacific, let's say. And they were telling me that the United States had no representative there, meaning that everybody was signing trade deals with China, and it wasn't because they wanted to, but it was because we literally did not have anyone who was available to sign the agreement. There was nobody there. and there are so many gaps and holes um, in the institutions of American government that it makes it almost impossible to do anything that's complicated um, uh, at any level of government. So what I would suspect is if he sent some sort of order. I mean, you think about it. How many counties are there in the United States? How many FBI agents?
3,100.
Yeah, and you're gonna find you're gonna order 5,000 FBI agents to go and seize ballot boxes in counties. They couldn't do it. I mean, they just physically wouldn't be able to coordinate that as an activity. I don't,
And you're saying that the city, the county attorney
and that
is
would
on
be
the
if they
phone.
wanted to do it.
Right, right, right.
And if
But
they
you're
agreed
saying,
with it, then but I just, I don't know that they would be able to order the vans.
yeah,
I mean, they
yeah.
wouldn't even be able to figure out how to order the vans to put the FBI agents in. I, that's,
Bart, do you agree with the professor on this?
I differ slightly only because only because the Trump administration is trying to begin to do some of these things.
yeah.
I think their threats about federalizing things will result in some kind of whacknoid executive order from the White House, where most of the executive order will be Trump's signature, and he'll put a bunch of basically gibberish into the order, and there will be people in some southern states primarily who will try to abide by that executive order. The rest of the country will not. And it's going to create a whole lot of strife and confusion. And I think that's the kind of thing that like endangers the November election. Because
Well,
elections do,
let
what's
me add
that?
a nuance then, Bart, because there's been two examples in the county where you and I live, Arapahoe
Yeah.
County, where Republican precinct leaders and officials have been saying we're going to do this with election judges. They've
Mm-hmm.
once made the press pretty significantly. And so I have my eyes alert to just to throw out chaos. Like if
Yeah.
a single professor, every single ballot box in Colorado has a Republican and Democratic person going together. It's one of the checks and balances. But if one of the people go, there's fraud here. I see something unusual. They're dropping ballots out. I don't know, whatever crazy thing they say. Well, that could throw all sorts of chaos into that precinct slash election center slash county. And that could happen all over the country simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
Think I'm a madman?
I would throw Arizona in there. I don't know if you're counting Arizona as a southern state, but um,
I agree, Stephen.
you mean Sun Belt or if you mean Old South.
No, I think you're right about Arizona.
Um, but I think there would be some potential. I don't know if I would confine it to the South. There would be a smattering of secretaries of state who would, um, who might try to do something like this, and Trump might preemptively pardon them also. Who knows what kind of goofball stuff he might try to do. I mean, like I said,
Professor, you
but
have
this is
enough.
what I always find frustrating. Like, Trump does enough actual stuff. We could spin ourselves into uh, a tailspin by imagining what he's going to do or not do, because then it makes him look reasonable when he doesn't do it. You
Yeah.
know, and then we look like we're unhinged. So that's why I tend not to engage in this kind of speculation.
Okay, and you have enough trust in our systems that even in the example I gave, there's still county attorneys, there's secretaries of state, there's elected judges, there's supervisors, that the system is strong enough to, they have processes to deal with this.
Yeah,
That
and I think that ultimately that kind of stuff would get fast tracked to the Supreme Court so quickly that we would have a Supreme Court decision within a weekend, you know.
because of the fundamental right to vote is so essential to citizenship in a democracy that the
Yeah,
Supreme Court would act.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I happen to kind of, I
And
happen to
then
think.
I think that the Americans across the board would obey the Supreme Court decision, not the orders of the president.
Yeah, I concur with that. I think our system is strong enough. But it is what you warned about 10 years ago, that he's a fundamental danger to institutions.
Yes,
But
because
the
he does
institutions
not
of
value them at all, and he's also, um, he's willfully ignorant. He does not want to know. I think that's one of the traits that is really important from anybody who spent time with him, is that he does not. He is contemptuous of people who know things, and he does not want to know them.
hmm,
The fact that he still doesn't understand a trade deficit, I think on some level, he knows that if he ever actually understood what a trade deficit was, then he would know that everything he's been saying is nonsense. So he better not ever learn that.
yeah, I think that's really insightful. It would
I
be
mean, for
embarrassing.
instance, like not knowing what a balance of payments is, he's like, essentially the new tariff authority he's claiming is because we have a balance of is designed over something called balance of payments problems, which hasn't been a problem since
Right.
off the gold standard. So we don't have a balance of payment problem, but I think if you don't know what that means, then you feel like maybe I can still make this argument, which is absurd.
Yeah. Cool. Julie, you're a newcomer to our group, if my memory's right. And you've been typing a couple things. Are you comfortable with what you've typed, or would you like to ask something now verbally?
I don't mind speaking. I hope you don't mind that I look like the cat dragged me in. The cat literally dragged me in. She's
You're
on my
great.
lap. So,
Question or comment?
yeah, I actually was a discipline lead in DC for a federal agency and left under the Doge pressure.
Ah,
And am getting ready to join a faculty at a state university in the West. And I'm an economist by training, but have studied behavioral economics and did my dissertation in behavioral economics. And I was very concerned about everything I was seeing from before the first Trump election, and even more so in between the two. And did everything I could to try to share my what I would call expert opinion with as many of my friends and family members and in my circles as possible. But it's kind of a spitting into the wind thing when you're in a Western red state. And so I've really appreciated this discussion. And it's interesting. I've seen this full spectrum of opinions. I don't know if you're familiar with Ann Mitchell. She's a friend of mine. She's at one end of the spectrum. She's an attorney who's quite prominent in Substack and so on circles.
so is she in Colorado? What was her name?
Yeah, yeah. And I want
Yeah.
Mitchell. Yeah, she is borderline livid angry at people who hint that or even say that Trump can do something to disrupt or stop elections. On the other hand, there are people I highly respect who are saying he is trying to, and that's already in the works. And I think that there's this middle ground that you alluded to where logistically speaking, it's not going to be possible for them. As you say, there aren't enough vans in the United States, let alone the FBI agents necessary to go around and do all the disruptive things. One thing they could do is disrupt at the corporate level, where they would get involved in the voting machine companies. And I mean, they've kind of already toyed around with the edges of that a little bit. And I see some of that as being incredibly dangerous, because even if it doesn't succeed at a national blanket level,
Yeah, and you're talking about the news of the last couple of days of Chinese involvement in the 2020.
Well, and this goes way back. This is not new. It's funny how things become news when suddenly someone who cares a lot about it writes a story about it and somebody picks up on it. But this has been around for a long time. This is not new.
So your
So
comment or question, Professor?
my question is, I guess is it a comment or question? I think it's valid to hold either of those positions. And I think it's scary to think what the extreme could be if they behave the way they've already been behaving. If we see people dragged out of voting lines because somebody isn't satisfied that their idea is adequate and get thrown in detention for a week, that could have a really chilling effect on elections. And I hope we never see that. But given what we have seen, I don't think it's far-fetched to think it could happen.
Well, and Professor, let me add one more in. Thank you, Julian. You can have a
Sure.
follow-up if you'd like. Let me add one more to that. You don't think it's conceivable that the president won't work with the Republican Congress to not seat new Congress people if the Democrats take over because of fraud elements throughout you don't think that's in a playbook, or even if it isn't a playbook, it won't matter?
You know,
I know
my
you said you
favorite
don't
book.
like this
Well, I just
discussion.
like my favorite book is True Grit, and
Yeah.
there's a line from True Grit where he says, I don't like to deal in hypotheticals. The world as it is vexing enough. If he did that, I would, then become concerned about it. But he's doing and has done enough stuff already in real life that I feel like I'm having a hard time even keeping up with that without dealing with like what he could potentially do.
Yeah, and I'll ponder your reflections. It's helpful for me to hear you say that. It's interesting though that it doesn't look like you can relate to my point. Is, well, wait, he already did it from November to January 6th I mean, it's the same
Sure.
guy.
Yeah.
We know he's done it. We know he threatens elected officials. We know he threatens
Yeah.
congressmen. We
We
know
know he's trying to intimidate people who counted votes against him, that
yes. Why would we not? Why would he change his stripes between now and the next? I don't. It seems like
I
we've
just,
been.
I guess I would say I would assume that he will try to find ways of doing it more effectively in the future. Um, I just don't know that he's going to be successful.
Because you have trust in our institutions, that there's enough good, decent people that have sworn to uphold the Constitution in the FBI and sheriff's offices and county election judges
And
and
also, this is one of these areas that is not so complicated that it doesn't already have eyes on it.
yeah,
When he's doing things, you know, with financial holdings and a story will come out in the Financial Times or the Wall Street Journal or um, something like that. Often the technical details are so hard to understand that the American people don't really get their it doesn't arouse our ire. But there are a lot of people watching ballot boxes. And
well,
there are a lot of news organizations who can publicize if and when that ever happens. And the kinds of people who count ballots are locals. We know
yeah,
it, we know these people. It's not um, it, it would be very difficult to do
yeah,
that.
and also the intensity of the individual voter, the citizen who wants their vote to count. They don't want to say, "Well, that's my vote." What do you? I mean, it would count that is
Yeah.
pretty enormous in America. We take our voting seriously, right?
Yes. Absolutely.
We may
So
not
I would
vote.
just say, like, of the things I'm worried about, I worry far more about things that he's doing that people aren't going to pay attention to. Everyone would pay attention to that.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's a fair point. Julia, did you have one last bite at the apple, or we're going to hop off here shortly? If you're good, don't take yourself off mute. Okay, Professor Tootle. Sorry for the technological things today. I don't know what happened on that. Um, as an overall theme, though, um, have we talked about Trump enough? Can we, as a conservative, I hate thinking about him every day, and I guess you also say take long walks and pet a dog and do things, and he just keeps forcing his way back into all our lives with some weird scandal or some weird thing, and at some point, I just want the federal government to be in the background.
Mhm.
I want the I want state and local governments to be what we talk about. And if we are we going to be forced to continue to have conversations in the next 2 years of our Toodle Talk show about what Trump's doing? Or is there a way to move on from this at some point, or we have to wait until he's out of office? Just power of personality is so strong that we just have to talk about it once in a while.
Well, I talk about it more with you than anybody else. Because I don't know if people know how this show is created or how it functions, but I always say I will do no preparation.
Right.
When the mics heat up, I just answer whatever question you ask me. So if
So
you stop
you
asking me about Trump, I'll stop talking about him.
so you think we do talk about the president too much? I mean, you and me, plus the rest of every political activist.
I mean, not necessarily. Probably, because I think we should be beginning with. I just wish we could talk about policy again, but it's policy doesn't matter until someone else comes into office. You know, it's one of the things that has, what's the point of advocating for a particular policy?
Well, immigration. I've been big on that. I
Yeah,
want there to be fundamental immigration reform.
if it's not, if essentially everyone is resigned to just simply say, I want this done via executive order, and it's just going to change based on whoever the next president is. You're not, people are, we're not talking about what's best for the United States in the long run. I mean, I would love it if, I mean, what we should really do, I would love it if we did a show, and this is going to sound completely random. We get Hiram Lewis on here.
Yeah.
We just talk about motorcycle regulations. There's a couple of like policy prescriptions that I would love to have, someone who's an expert on the industry, and then two smart motorcycle riders ask him questions about how could we improve this? How can we make it actually better? You know, and yeah, that would be boring, maybe because, but I actually do love thinking about. This is a hard lesson I learned actually. A friend of mine who was involved in local politics for years, we did something really, I don't even know if I want to say what it was because it would tell you who I'm talking about, but he came up with this incredible policy prescription that ended up saving tens of millions of dollars for the county. I mean, tens of millions of dollars. And it enabled boy, I should be more vague too. It enabled a massive good thing for the environment as well. And he did all this incredibly hard work to create this thing that both saved the county tens of millions of dollars and helped protect the environment. And I remember telling him, this is incredible what we're doing. You should be able to run for office forever on this. I mean, if you think about how great this is, that we're saving tens of millions of dollars and helping to preserve, well, again, I don't want to say exactly what, but did this incredible thing for the environment. And he said, I hope nobody ever finds out about this. We need to keep this quiet. And I thought, what? Here we have a politician who's actually doing a good thing and he wants to keep it quiet. Why? Because he would get destroyed by quote unquote both sides. Like, what are you doing something to help the environment? Are you a squish? Are you a liberal? What are you? And then you're saving the county tens of millions of dollars by doing something that's hurting a bigger national NGO that is affiliated with the environment. So it would just mean that, next time he ran for office, his local office, his Republican challenge, he would have a Republican challenger and a Democratic challenger that would both have unlimited money to kick him out of office. So he was like, best if I never get credit for this.
Just to do good work, because that's what he was elected to do.
Yeah. And I remember thinking there's a horrible lesson in there somewhere that
Yeah.
that this guy is doing something that would have 90% approval in his district, and he doesn't want anybody to know that he did it.
Yeah, and Professor, not to be insulting to us, but we've been doing this for 5 years, and we both consciously, even though we have controversial issues, we've talked abortion and gays and war and I mean all sorts of imaginable contemporary issues, bringing it in with history. But it's not like we're trying to get hits by saying something controversial where
Yeah.
it blows up the internet and everybody's after you or me. We're just trying to do good work and understanding citizenship, whether anyone watches it or not. So maybe we should continue with Hiram Lewis talking motorcycle stuff, or how to just be good citizens, how good
Well,
government should work.
we probably need to have him on again talking about the myth of left and right again, because I feel like that's a show we should do every year. But I would also like to have him on and talk about motorcycles and get Lindsay Travinsky on here to defend John Adams.
Okay, and John Adams. And I'm really glad you defended him so well. Okay, Professor, thanks for the show. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Appreciate you.
Yeah, you too. Great to see you.
All right. Thanks, Julie, for joining us. Have a great day, y'all.
Bye bye.